Welcome to Generations, a show which helps people 50 and better lead happy, healthy, and productive lives. Here's today's moderator, Beverly Crosby.
Welcome, everybody, to Generations. I'm Beverly Crosby. I will be your moderator today. We also have Nadia Jordana with us, who has been with Generations as a moderator for quite some time. Nadia has some news to share with us today. Welcome, Nadia.
Thank you, Beverly. I'm happy to be here. I'm always happy when I'm on Generations, and the changes won't keep me that far away, but we have a couple of other programs. It's a Woman's World and Women of the World, which will be rolled into one program. It's a Woman's World. I will be co-producing and moderating that program, and you will be co-producing and moderating Generations. And at the same time, we'll be backing each other up, filling in for each other whenever necessary, and keeping the programs rolling. So 2021 will be a very interesting year for the shows.
Oh, thank you. And it's been great having you around, and look forward to you popping in once in a while, and good luck with the other shows.
You too, and good luck with the show today.
Thank you much. Okay, let's get on with our show today. We're going to meet with Jill Johnson, who's going to help us understand how to select housing and for your aging parents, for your loved ones, even yourself. And so we have a whole lot of information to cover. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you. Robert, how are you today?
I'm great. Hi, Beth. Good to see you too. Glad to be here.
Midge, nice to see you.
It's great to be here, and I'm very anxious to hear what Jill has to say today.
And David, so glad you could join us today.
Nice to be here since I'm hitting the big 7-0 in a few weeks. Jill Johnson, I hope, has some information that I can use.
Gloria, how are you?
I'm great. I'm very glad to be here. And I too am very eager to hear what Jill has to say. Being young herself, I'm very interested to hear her story and what she's got to say for the rest of us. Welcome, Jill.
Be here.
And welcoming our guest, Jill Johnson. Jill, so happy you're here with us today. Let me just talk a little bit about we're going to discuss today. I'm going to read this. Jill is going to discuss healthy aging and what role that senior living environments play in supporting that. She's also going to talk about the differences of different types of senior housing, what to look for your loved ones, for yourself. I know that's something that's very close to all of us because we're all in that age bracket, and whether we've dealt with helping our parents or ourselves or loved ones, you know, this is really important information. Jill has, for the audience as well, Jill has received numerous awards locally and nationally for her consulting work. She's helped an immense amount of organizations and very large companies throughout our country. So Jill, maybe tell us a little bit about how you got started with this.
Sure. Well, I've had my own business management consulting practice called Johnson Consulting Services for over 3 decades. And prior to starting my company, I worked in the management consulting division of one of the world's largest public accounting firms. And they were also one of the world's largest consulting practices at the time. And they had a deep industry specialty in senior housing, which back in that era was independent living and skilled nursing. And I ended up on one of the internal teams to create the analytical methodologies for determining market feasibility for this new concept called assisted living, which up until about 30 to 35 years ago did not exist. And so we were creating the protocols, frankly, that are still in use today as the industry standard. So I have a almost 3.5 decade of experience in looking at all different types of senior housing, and that has expanded even into hospice services, post-acute, short-term rehab services, so that full spectrum, and home care. So the whole spectrum of anything that touches senior healthcare and the senior living and lifestyle. I've probably been in at least 3,000 senior living communities over the last 3+ decades, from all across the country. And, we've seen what works, what doesn't work, what makes for a good provider and not. I've worked with some of the world's, some of the most premier senior living enterprises have been clients of mine, including Covenant Retirement Communities, which is the 5th largest not-for-profit senior living enterprise in the US. Mayo Clinic's senior living community, Charterhouse, has been a longstanding client of mine. I've got other longstanding clients in other major markets, in particular like Cleveland and East Coast. And, we've worked on all ends of the spectrum from active adult housing, so that 55+. So I actually qualify to live in senior housing, folks. And it's just a matter of where it fits on the continuum and what those resources are and how they fit. So we'll talk about that.
Okay, and who would like to ask the next question?
You mentioned there were 3 types. I think I know what they are, but could you tell us what they are and the needs that are met in those?
Sure. Well, I'm going to even add one more. I think in the pre-material, I just listed 3, but there's actually really 4. The first would be active adult housing. You might call that empty nester. It's basically housing for age-restricted. It's an age-restricted community. So it's 55+. There are no extra services. You have your apartment or your home that you have within the campus compound. They may have a community room, an exercise room, but generally speaking, there are no formalized services offered by the staff. If you need something extra, you bring that in on your own, just as you would if you were in your own home. So active adult housing is a whole growing segment of the industry. The next layer up is what we call independent living. Typically, independent living has some level of service component to it, particularly in a state like Minnesota. It's housing with services. And so usually what you're getting is your apartment, access to 1 meal a day. There's usually weekly housekeeping. There's access to formalized activities programming. So they may have a fitness center with some fitness classes run by a staff member. They may have activities programming, most of which are run by staff, but occasionally they'll have some resident run activities involved in it. And that too, you're for the most part living your life. You're in and out, you pick and choose the things that you want to participate in. You come and go as you please, and you're good to go. What's nice about that type of housing is they usually have the ability for you to age in place. And so as your health needs might change, you might need a little bit of help setting your medications up. You might need maybe access to another meal. You're a little more reliant on the bus service that maybe they offer through the campus. Those are the types of things that you would find, and you can grow into expanded use of services. Then you have assisted living. Typically, as we look at assisted living offers 3 meals a day, access to some level of supportive services, whether it's helping with bathing and dressing or some of the activities of daily living. But the key differentiator is the 3 meals a day, and there's typically more of a healthcare dependency. People are frailer, they don't get out much. If they do get out, it's because the van takes them somewhere for an event. They're really not, they're more living within that campus setting, and that's kind of where their home is. Then the 4th area is skilled nursing. And skilled nursing is not like the nursing home we were going to put our grandmas in, 30, 40 years ago. It's different. skilled nursing today typically offers two different levels of care. One are the long-term care services. So those are usually people who have very complex health issues. They need 24 hours significant medical supervision, or they need significant assistance in transferring. So they need two people to lift them and to move them. The second type of service that you'll find in skilled nursing are post-acute or subacute transitional care services. So you have a hip replaced in the hospital, you get discharged to a nursing home for some rehab, and then the goal is for you to go back to your own home, wherever that may be. It could be on the campus, it could be back into the community. And so skilled nursing has really shifted from what it was historically. And so it hits kind of two ends of the healthcare spectrum within the skilled nursing environment.
Yeah, my brother bought a house recently in a 55 plus neighborhood like that, and they have a golf course,
Mm-hmm.
swimming pools.
Yep.
So
Yep.
a lot of activities that you can still do.
Exactly. And that's the whole point of that style of housing, is that you're still able to live that fully active lifestyle. And even when you get into that next level up, that independent living, where you do get that one meal a day, and some providers are a little, they'll work with you a little bit. If you don't need one meal a day, sometimes they'll work with you, but it's still an age, there's an age segregation to it. It's not like just anybody can move in. And so that creates some different camaraderie, because not everybody wants to be around kids unless they choose to be. And so it can be a really nice environment to be around others who share common interests and common values, and a great way to socialize. David, you had a
I
question.
was just going to ask if there's anything that you see people doing that's the single biggest mistake you can make as you're trying to figure out what to do. Something that you'd think common sense would dictate to do X, but really you should be doing Y instead, whatever that may be.
Well, I think the biggest mistake that I see people making is they just wait too long, and they're of a mind where they're growing older, maybe 75, 78 years old, and they're still active and, doing all their different things, but they're not thinking ahead about, what do I want when and if something happens. And I always tell people, if you're a married couple, you're better off moving into an independent living community that has a continuum available to you, because couples typically age at different rates. And so it's not uncommon for one spouse to be a caregiver for the other. And then if one spouse passes, then you're going to have to make that big move without your spouse from the last place you lived together. I know my aunt, when we made that move for her, she called me the night before she left to move into her new independent living apartment, and she was crying. I'm like, this is a lady who sent an admiral after her son who hadn't written letters home during the Vietnam War. And I said, Auntie Gert, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she said, I don't know. And so, I'm kind of thinking, I'm like, I know what it is. I was like, Gert, this is the last time you're going to be in the last place you lived with Uncle Joe. And, but you're moving him in all your memories and all your furniture and all of your photographs, but it still was the last place she lived with him. So what I encourage couples is to be very pragmatic about what they want long-term. And for a lot of people, they want to be the ones to make those decisions, not their kids. And so if you find a community, a senior living community that has at least independent living and assisted living, you really can get most of your long needs met there over through the remainder of your life. Sometimes, there's issues with skilled nursing. So if you're worried about that, or you have a family history with a lot of complex health conditions, then maybe you look for a provider that also has a skilled nursing home on site or within the framework of the campuses that they own, and make the move while you're still physically fit and able, and you'll still live the same life you live now. It's just you've changed your geography before there's a crisis. And what you see most people doing, and I'm sure many of you have, you know, had a loved one who had a major health episode, and all of a sudden you're scrambling to find a place for mom. Well, the reality is do you find the best place for mom when you're making a choice like that under an extreme set of duress? And so even if mom isn't sick, start looking now, go on tours, look at their websites, begin to understand what the costs associated with the care might be, and start looking at budgets. Don't wait until it's dire. The other thing is, if you wait, the place that you might want to go to because it's the best is going to have a really long waiting list. So you're not going to get in the minute you decide. But if you're on a waiting list and they call you and you can say, nope, not ready yet, you still preserve your place in line. And so you'll still be able to get your call and have the option and the choice. But when most people wait too long, they're at the end of the wait list. And, you know, it can take sometimes, for a really great provider, it can take a year to 2 years to get in, or to get into the style of unit that you want to live in. I know a lot of my clients, you know, were dealing with issues like that with their prospects. And so we have to try and help them understand realistically what the lead times will be for move in, so that they can plan accordingly. It's not something that today you decide you're going to need to move in, and magically you're going to find exactly the style unit you want, with the exact right view on the exact campus, with the exact amenities and features that you want today. It's a
Jill,
much more complex process.
Jill, you mentioned something that really struck a chord with me, and you were talking about pictures and furniture or whatever. The word I want to get out there is stuff. There comes a time in our lives, everybody, that stuff is meaningless. And one of the reasons that my husband and I moved to a townhouse was because we had too much stuff. We had married after both of us became widowed, and we had 2 or 3 of everything, and it lived in my husband's big house. So we just decided we need to get rid of things before our children have to do it for us. That is so important, right, Jill?
It so is. I mean, both of my parents died within 8 months of each other at the age of 64. So as children, we had to go through and finalize all of those life decisions that had never been made. No one expected them to be gone 20 years before they should have been, but it was the way the universe set it up for them. And it's hard. And what we encourage people to do is to prioritize. So when I'm working with sales reps for a senior living community, we're talking about, don't just show them, you know, here's the cupboards and here's the closet space, but to have the prospect imagine, you know, do they have something really special that they plan to bring? Maybe it's a curio cabinet that belonged to their mother. Well, which wall do you think you would put that curio cabinet on, so that they can begin to imagine in that space where they would put those items? I did a focus group for a client many years ago in Chicago, and one of the women who was in the group was a relatively new resident of the campus. And she said, you know, Jill, the thing is the staff never knew. Every time I came to visit my friends who live here, I saw all their different style of apartment units. And so I was able to start imagining what I wanted to live in. And by the time I finally told the staff that I was ready to get on the wait list, I already knew which style unit I wanted, and I knew exactly how I was going to put my things in that unit before they ever knew I was interested in the campus. And so I've always held that in my heart on understanding those complex decisions. And it's usually if you're healthy and active, what we're talking about is making a want-based decision. If you're looking at assisted living or skilled nursing, that's a need based decision. And so the decision criteria are very different. The level of immediacy is very different. You know, if you need assisted living for mom because she had a stroke and was discharged from the hospital and is never going to go home again, then, you know, now all of a sudden you need to find a place for her right now, this instant. And I've lived that too. My mother-in-law suffered from a complex set of health issues that created dementia. And so, you know, we had to go through all of the family stress of, you know, convincing my brother-in-law that she really needed to move. And, you know, we found the perfect place for her, but I knew it was just going to be a temporary setting. And when then she ended up in the hospital, and it was clear when she was in the hospital, she would never go back to that apartment. She needed a higher care area. And for all of the work that I've done in this, I had never done site visits in the area around where her children live. And other, you know, I knew a lot of places, but not there. And so fortunately, I knew people in the industry that I could call that I trusted. And you know, because the hospital just gives you 3 places when they discharge you, but I knew we weren't going to be leaving, and I didn't want to have to make 2 moves with her. And so I called my colleagues and I said, you know, if it was your mom, where would you go? And they said none of those on the list. And they said, here's where we would go. And when we went and toured before she was discharged, I knew exactly the questions I wanted to ask. I knew what I wanted to see. I wanted to talk with the staff. I wanted to talk with the team. I wanted to do that smell test, if you will. And, you know, it ended up, it was an extraordinary provider. She lived there for 3 years, and she was not an easy resident to deal with, but the caring and compassion of the staff was superb. And I would probably not have found that perfect provider had I not had a good network, because even for me, you know, didn't occur to me that I would need to find something that quickly for her.
Okay.
So
The rest of us who don't have this network, how do we do that? How do we access?
Okay, and just so we know, just so everybody's aware, we're getting short on time. We still have a little ways to go here, but Midge's question, and then also talk briefly, if you would, about the cost involved. I know that's a big concern for a lot of people.
well, let's hold on that, Beverly. And so Midge, to your point, today you have the internet. I mean, it's an amazing resource. So if you can identify geographically where you think, if we're talking about higher care, for example, where you want mom. So you want mom to live close to you or close to your sister. Start with geography. Then you can start looking on the internet. Assisted living is typically licensed. So sometimes you can find through the states, different states we work in have access to resources. The area agencies on aging often have resource lists. Sometimes communities have magazines and publications for free that you can access. But you typically start with geography. So if you live in Fridley, you would look at the communities close to Fridley as your starting point. And then you decide about how far out are you going to go. And then I would physically go and visit them. Again, if you can do this without mom ever even knowing, that's fine, because you're just exploring. You're not making a decision. You're just going for a tour. And sites will do a tour with you. It's not a problem for you to come. If you say, we're, you know, looking at making a decision or helping my mother make a decision, I'm trying to narrow down some options for her, and I would like to do a tour. And the same thing holds true if you're looking for you. You know, if we want to live by our grandkids in Golden Valley, well, what providers offer active adult housing or independent living that are near those areas where you would want to live to be close to the grandchildren? And so that really is kind of that first starting point. The other thing you can do is you can ask people at your church, you know, if faith is very important to you, where do most of the people from this parish go? Usually the church secretaries they know. We interview church secretaries all the time for competitive intel, because they know where their parishioners typically are going, because they're often sending, you know, visitors or for communion and things like that. But it's you got to do the footwork. So that is the most important thing that I can tell you. And finding a list of names, you know, once you just start Googling senior housing Fridley, senior assisted living Golden Valley, you'll start to get into the proper websites, and there's so many that's too many to list on a show like this, but and they vary market to market. But just know those are just a starting point. Then look at the website for the community that you're looking at, the senior living community, and then go tour. So you want to be prepped. And Beverly, to your question, the costs really vary across the country pretty significantly. So in some of the active adult housing, you actually own your home. In others, it's a rental, and it would be typically whatever usually is a little bit more than the market rate for apartments of whatever size and style in the local multifamily market. When you start getting into independent living, it's going to depend a lot on the age of the senior living community and the positioning that they have relative to the level of affluence that they're targeting for their older adults. There's a lot of low to moderate income housing now that is a little bit more like active adult housing that fits that middle income market. They have income restrictions, and a lot of seniors who are on a very tight budget often can qualify to move into those, but they don't typically have a lot of extra services, but a good resident network, which is really an important thing. When you're looking at a sponsor, provider sponsored or a for-profit owned site, again, it depends on what you're offering and the size of the unit, but $1,500 to $3,000 a month would be a typical cost to look at. Assisted living, you're looking, again, level of service. Are they incontinent? Do they need med reminders? Do they need wanderer reminders? All of those things add the cost up. Typically, you're looking at around $3,000 to $4,000 for assisted living. And if they need additional levels of care, it can go up to $7,000 to $8,000 a month. Assisted living has, for the private pay market, become the alternative to the skilled nursing home. And a lot of assisted living providers, in order to keep people on their site, are pushing the boundaries of the level of care that they offer and taking more complex, keeping residents a lot longer. You're starting to see some of the state regulators looking more closely because assisted living has pushed that boundary almost too far because they haven't been as regulated as nursing homes. So there's care issues and quality of care issues.
Okay,
And then
I hate to stop you right there because you're just a wealth of information, but we're running out of time. And so I do want to also mention that you are also an author. Can you tell us about the book that you've written?
sure. The book I have that's behind me is called Market Forces, Strategic Trends Impacting Senior Living Providers. So it's a book that I wrote for the very folk that you might seek housing with, to help them better understand the complexities of the markets that they serve. The industry is filled with competitive options and alternatives. We've also had people ask me if I would write a book on kind of like what we're talking about now. How do I pick housing for myself or my mom? Do you guys think that's something I should bother to take the time to write?
Yes. Welcome.
Yes, do it.
Yeah, at least.
What a lot of good information from Joe Johnson. Thank you, Joe, so much. And guests, I hope you learned something today. I know some of you have already been down that road, finding a place for your loved ones, maybe even for yourself. But hopefully there were some tips that you gained from our discussions today. And thank you for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you next time on Generations.